basically on this futuring thing, I wanted to take a look and say, okay, over the next 15 years, what's going to be happening in the United States that we need to be paying attention to? I want this to be kind of some of the things we talk around the table. So most of you are probably familiar with the bell curve of innovation and innovation acceptance. At the front end of the curve there, this everything under the curve represents the population of our country. 2.5% make up the innovators. They're the venturesome people. They're the ones that take big risks. The next slice in that are the people that we would consider to be the early adopters. They make about 13%. So where your Steve Jobs kind of person might be in your 2.5%. All the people that wait in line the night that the iPhone 4 is released or the iPod is released, they make up that 13%. Okay? Now, in order for a technology or anything to basically reach its status, it has to cross that 13% threshold. If it doesn't do that, you don't break into the majority of your population and find acceptance, which is why a lot of apps will be free. You'll have free trials on things. They're trying to get that critical mass from that early 15% to try and cross that mark so that it can take off and become standard, right? So that next group is going to be called the early majority. They're very deliberate. They basically say, I don't need to get the iPad the day or the week that it comes out. I got a month to do that after the thing releases. I'll wait. Then you have the late majority that's skeptical and says, I'm not sure if that iPad's really any good, if it's going to work, so I'm going to wait till I see how many people have it, and that there's a good word on it, and then I'll get that iPad. They make up that second half. And then the last group are the laggards. They're the people that buy a push-button phone because rotary phones you just can't find them anywhere. Okay? So when you think about these different groups of people, just think about your own church community and your own life, because we probably fall into different spectrums on the change curve depending on what it is. For instance, with technology, some of us in youth ministry might fall more toward the front of the pack on that, but when it comes to things like actually changing the way that we're running programs, that we're structuring things, we might tend to find ourselves a little bit more to the middle or even the tail end. And when you think about church denominations, pretty good chance you're going to find them in the 16% there at the very end that change against their will. We were just having that conversation. United Methodists, they just released a big paper called Call to Action, right? Basically saying, we're dying as a denomination. We've got to crank things up or we're done. And it's kind of a thing that, you know, those conversations were going on for years. They're just kind of, it's just now that the denomination's kind of like taking initiative. So this is kind of the way these things happen. So as we're looking at the future, we're definitely looking, you know, in that first 15% of the population and trying to think ahead and be ahead of the curve. But nobody can predict the future. Nobody really knows what the future holds. So what we're really trying to do by talking about these things today is not so much say this is how it's going to be and this is what we need to do. What we're trying to do is rehearse the future, to imagine what things could be like and think about, okay, it may go this way, it may not. You know, Proverbs says, many are the plans, man makes many plans, but the Lord determines the steps. So what we want to do is rehearse and think about the future, count the cost of finishing the tower so that along the way we can correct course, we can adjust, we can go in different directions if we need to. There are a lot of people that say, you know, I don't want to worry about this. I've got enough things to deal with today. I don't need to think about tomorrow. Jesus even said that, biblical support for that. But I think one of the interesting things that Obama has said about his presidency was this. In an interview, he said, obviously, most of the time it seems that the president has maybe 10% of his agenda set by himself and 90% of it set by circumstances. So, you know, Abraham Lincoln is defined by slavery and the war, FDR defined by the Depression of World War II. Definitely true. George W. Bush, his presidency was definitely defined not by any policy or platform that he ran on. It was all defined by 9/11 and the events that took place on that day. For President Obama, for as many of the plans, the dreams he had, even the stuff that he's pushed through over the last 2 years, basically the circumstances are dictating how he needs to act and operate and respond. And so one of the hard things in ministry is we get these visions, we get these dreams of what we want to accomplish and what we want to do and what we want to build. But the reality is, and sometimes the circumstances can squelch that. Right now, just seem to be absolutely the digital generation, Generation Z, enter into our middle school programs. By the time 2015 rolls around, we will be ministering to a generation that is being born this year. And the world that they grow up in is going to be radically different than the world that any other generation has grown up before them. And what are those kind of challenges going to be that we're going to need to be ready for at that present time? So there are basically 5 things that I look at, trend areas when I'm thinking about youth ministry and what we need to be thinking of. The first is people. Obviously, ministry is a people-oriented type of thing, so we want to make sure that we know what kind of people are going to be out there and who we're going to be ministering to and what the nature of those people are going to be like. The second thing that we want to look at is impact. How is the church, how is the gospel changing culture? How are people seeing the impact of God's people at work in society? The third area is time. One of the things you'll notice as we look at the next 2, money isn't going to come out. I kind of have found in ministry that if God is in it, the money is there to support it. So I don't look at the resource of money so much when I'm looking at trends for youth ministry, because we're never going to have it anyway. You know, it never seems to be given to us. Children's ministers get it all. Isn't it true? You know, like when I go speak for like a youth group, they're like, "Hey, man, we got some McDonald's gift certificates for you. Enjoy. You know, you can even get dessert. You know, well, great." You go to children's ministry, they like open up a safe and they've got like stacks of $100 bills. And I'm like, how much do you need, man? You know what I mean? It's like amazing how different that is. But one thing that we're all equal in is we only have 24 hours a day. Whether you're Donald Trump, or you're President Obama, whether you're the smartest person in the world, or you're homeless, you only have 24 hours to spend each and every day. Because of that, it's a fixed commodity that every person has. Because relationships take time, our ministry things take time, looking at how people are spending their time is a very important trend in thinking about our ministry and how we're doing things. The fourth area is the law. What are legal changes, things that happen in our world that may give us opportunity or prevent us from doing the things that we need to do to spread and promote the gospel? And then the last thing is plausibility. When I'm looking at plausibility, what I'm basically saying is how willing is the culture to believe the claims of Christ and the Scripture? The Christian music industry, back in 2002, 2003, somewhere in there, I can't remember which year it was, but they, the five of the major record labels asked me to come in to consult with them about the morality of illegal downloading. And I said, your problem is not one of morality and illegal downloading, your problem is one of time. And they couldn't get their head around it. They kept saying, no, you know, they sell more blank CDs and they do ones with music on it. And I go, yeah, but I buy sleeves of blank CDs. I don't put music on any of them. It's all for data, so that's not a good stat. They didn't realize how people were using music differently. It was now something that you shared. It wasn't something that you purchased and owned. And the television companies and the magazines, everybody was struggling with how people were spending their time and how do they get advertising dollars when people aren't getting their time in the same way. And so it's a very significant thing. Let's talk a little bit about people and how they're going to be changing over the next 15 years, because this is remarkable, some of the things that are going to be happening in this country. The first thing is the aging of baby boomers, right? We've got 70 million baby boomers roughly in our culture that make up the boom generation. Then in terms of Xers, that number gets cut below half, less than half. And then we've got generation Y that follows X that's back up into that 60 million kind of range. So those of you that were born 69-ish to, or 1965-ish to about 1980, basically you're in that Generation X zone, and there's a really good possibility that you feel overshadowed quite a bit by these other two generations and nobody really is there for you. We're a connector generation, a bridge building generation between the boomers and Generation Y. But for the first time in the United States history, we're going to have 70 million senior citizens by the time we hit 2025. They're going to be in their, the earliest of the baby boomers are going to be approaching 80. That's going to change the landscape of the country, our churches, and what's important, because they're also going to have money and marketing, and a lot of different things are going to be going to taking care of that baby boom generation, because there are, to give you an idea of how many that is, that's basically as many seniors in our world as there are African American people today. Okay? Just to give you an idea of how much that aging population is going to expand. Another thing that's going to be changing is an increase in the Hispanic population.